Hey PuraTHRIVE Nation, it's Thomas DeLauer with PuraTHRIVE, and I'm here to talk about some gut health. I'm always talking about turmeric, I'm always talking about B12, but let's talk about your gut for a minute. Today I'm talking about the difference between water kefir and kombucha, something you definitely need to know about. So water kefir is a liquid with a little bit of sugar that is fermented for only about 1 to 2 days. You see, usually it's something like coconut water. We're generally looking with water kefir, a water with about an 8% sucrose amount. That means less than 10% sugar, so very little amount of sugar. Again, typically talking about something like coconut water. Most of the water kefir you see is going to be made from coconut water. And like I said, it's not fermented for very long. Just a couple of days, just enough to get a little bit of the bacteria and a little bit of the yeast to actually do its thing. Then we've got the more famous kombucha, okay? The kombucha that you know and love, that you see at Whole Foods and you see at the store all the time. That's a little bit different. You see, kombucha is made from black tea that's usually sweetened. And what they do is they add something to it. They add bacteria and they add yeast in the form of what is called a SCOBY. And what that stands for is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And it looks like a mushroom. They add that to the tea and then they let it ferment for up to 30 days. That's what gives it that really acidic, pungent, well, pretty obvious taste. It's the high levels of acid. So right out the gate, we see the difference. Water kefir is less acidic, only fermented for a couple of days and not from tea, whereas kombucha is fermented for a longer period of time. But let's talk about the difference of what it does inside your body. And this will dictate whether you are a kefir person or whether you are a kombucha warrior. All right, so both of them contain bacteria and yeast, just like I've mentioned. But the interesting thing about water kefir is water kefir has a higher amount of bacteria when it's actually fermented, even though it's only fermented for a couple of days. It also has a higher amount of lactic acid. That means more amounts of what are called Lactobacillus, which is the kind of bacteria that is most prevalent in our gut that actually breaks down a lot of what we consume over time. And it's actually what helps make up a lot of our immune system. So we end up having a higher amount of bacteria, but less in the way of digestive enzymes. This tells us that water kefir is a very, very, very powerful probiotic, and when taken in the morning, can end up providing you with a lot of good results in terms of replenishing your gut bacteria, especially after a round of antibiotics, or if you're someone that deals with a disruptive gut biome to begin with. Okay, then we have kombucha. How does kombucha work in the body? Well, since kombucha is fermented for a longer period of time and it's slightly different with the kinds of bacteria, it ends up being more acidic and more powerful in the way of digestive enzymes. But there's actually less bacteria in kombucha that has been fermented for 30 days than there is in water kefir that's only fermented for 1 or 2 days. And it also doesn't have nearly as much in the way of the lactobacillus or the lactic acid, which means that kombucha is really, really good for breaking down food that's in your system, but it's not quite so good at providing you with the bacteria that you need in order to actually feel so good. But there is a time and a place for each. You see, water kefir is great in the morning when you're trying to restore your gut bacteria and you're trying to make sure you have that gut biome healthy. But kombucha is better later in the day when you're trying to actually digest some of the food that you've consumed and getting the enzymatic activity going. Just bear in mind that a lot of times kombucha has some caffeine in it because it's fermented from tea. Now there's one more thing I want to add to this. And that's the fact that if you suffer from candida, which is sort of a bacterial yeast overgrowth in the upper GI tract, you typically want to avoid kombucha, which is a lot of what people end up doing. A lot of times they end up having kombucha if they have a yeast issue. Don't do that. You actually would want to go with water kefir because it's going to help replenish the good bacteria that can help negate some of the effects. As always, keep it locked in here with PuraTHRIVE Nutrition, where we're bringing you all kinds of health information on general whole foods, but also, of course, your trusted source when it comes to turmeric, when it comes to B12, when it comes to D3, and, well, anything inflammation related. I'll see you in the next video.